Welcome to our channel. Today, we're diving into one of the greatest films in Hollywood history, The Godfather. Not only is this movie a cinematic masterpiece, but it's also an excellent tool for learning English. Through its compelling story and rich dialogue, you can enhance your vocabulary, improve your listening skills, and understand complex sentence structures. But that's not all. As we explore The Godfather, you'll also gain insights into themes like loyalty, betrayal, and power. These elements provide a deeper understanding of the cultural and emotional nuances in the language. Join us as we break down this iconic film, offering you a unique way to improve your English while enjoying one of the best movies ever made. Subscribe to our channel for more engaging content and language learning tips. The Godfather, Part 1. Introduction. In the heart of New York City, in the 1940s, there was a powerful Italian-American family called the Corleones. They were known not just for their wealth and influence, but because they controlled a powerful criminal empire. They were one of the most feared and respected mafia families in America. At the center of this family was Don Vito Corleone. He was the head of the Corleone family, also called the Godfather. The Godfather was a man who helped many people. If you had a problem, you would come to him for help, but in return, you would owe him a favor one day. He was known for being wise, fair, but also very dangerous to his enemies. Don Vito had 4 children. Santino, Sonny, Corleone, the oldest son, known for his hot temper. Fredo Corleone, the middle son, not very strong or smart, but kind-hearted. Michael Corleone, the youngest son, who didn't want to be involved in the family business at first. Connie Corleone, their only daughter, who was about to get married at the beginning of the movie. The story begins at Connie's wedding, which is a huge event. Italian weddings were very traditional, with lots of family and friends coming together to celebrate with food, music, and dancing. But this wasn't just any wedding. It was the Corleone wedding, and everyone wanted to be there, even politicians and other important people. The Godfather's power. During the wedding, many guests came to the Godfather's office to ask him for favors. One by one, they came to pay their respects to Don Vito, knowing that if they asked for help on his daughter's wedding day, the Godfather would never refuse them. This is a big rule in their culture. If you ask the Godfather for help on such a special day, he has to help. One man named Bonacera came to ask Don Vito for justice. His daughter had been hurt by some young men, and he wanted them punished because the American courts had failed him. Don Vito listened carefully and agreed to help, but he reminded Bonacera that he should have come to him as a friend, not just when he needed something. Don Vito often spoke in riddles or wisdom. He told Bonacera that one day I may ask you for a favor in return. This is how the Godfather worked. He helped many people, but one day they would have to repay him. Another man, Johnny Fontaine, a famous singer and actor, came to the Godfather, asking for help with his career. He wanted a part in a movie, but the director wouldn't give it to him. Don Vito promised to make sure Johnny got the role, and he sent his loyal lawyer and consigliere, advisor, Tom Hagen, to make sure it happened. Michael and Kay. Outside, while all of this was happening inside the house, Michael Corleone, the youngest son, sat with his girlfriend, Kay Adams. Michael was different from the rest of his family. He had joined the army and fought in World War II, wanting to live an honest life, away from the family's criminal activities. Kay was not Italian, and she knew very little about the Corleones. Michael told Kay stories about his family, but he tried to make her understand that he wasn't like them. He said, "That's my family, Kay. It's not me." Michael loved his father, but he didn't want to be part of the mafia world, a dangerous business. While the wedding was full of laughter and celebration, the Corleone family's business was always serious. The family controlled many illegal activities, like gambling, bribing politicians, and controlling unions. But Don Vito had rules. He didn't want to be involved in the drug trade, which was becoming more popular at the time. He believed drugs were dangerous and would hurt his connections with honest politicians and the police. He wanted to keep his business clean, in his own way. One day, a man named Virgil Sollozzo, known as the Turk, came to Don Vito with a business offer. Sollozzo wanted the Corleones to help him sell drugs. He said it would be very profitable and promised to pay the Corleone family a lot of money if they protected him from the police. But Don Vito refused. He believed that getting into the drug trade would destroy everything he had built, and he didn't trust Sollozzo. However, Sollozzo didn't take no for an answer. He wanted the Corleone family's power, and he was willing to do anything to get it. This decision would set off a series of events that would change the lives of the Corleones forever. The Godfather, Part 1, Part 2. The Betrayal and the Attack. After Don Vito refused to get involved with Sollozzo's drug business, tensions began to rise. Sollozzo was a powerful man, but without the Corleone's protection, his drug business would be vulnerable to law enforcement. Sollozzo needed someone with influence to back him up, and the Corleones were the most powerful mafia family in New York. But when Don Vito rejected him, Sollozzo decided to take drastic action. One evening, Don Vito was walking home from his office with his bodyguards. He was careful and usually had men around him to protect him. However, Sollozzo had bribed one of Don Vito's men, Poligotto, to leave Don Vito unprotected. This betrayal was a huge mistake, and Polly would later pay for it. As Don Vito walked to his car, Sollozzo's men suddenly appeared and shot him several times in the street. Don Vito collapsed, bleeding, and it seemed like the Godfather might be dead. The entire city was shocked. Who would dare to attack the great Don Corleone? Michael learns the truth. At this time, Michael was living a quiet life, far from the family business. He wasn't involved in the criminal empire and wanted to stay away from it. But when he heard that his father had been shot, everything changed. Michael rushed to the hospital to see his father, worried for his safety. At the hospital, Michael found something shocking. There were no guards protecting Don Vito. His enemies were still out there, and Michael realized that someone was planning to finish the job. They wanted to kill his father while he was weak and defenseless in the hospital. Michael quickly took action. He moved his father to another room, hid him, and even stood outside the hospital pretending to be a guard himself. This was a huge turning point for Michael. He was starting to get involved in the family business, even though he had always wanted to avoid it. That night, Michael had his first taste of the danger his family lived with every day. Sonny takes over. While Don Vito was recovering in the hospital, Sonny Corleone, the eldest son, took over as the acting head of the family. Sonny was known for his fiery temper and was not as calm and calculating as his father. But now he was in charge, and he wanted revenge. Sonny ordered his men to track down Poligotto, the bodyguard who had betrayed them. In a brutal act of revenge, Sonny's men, including Clemenza, one of the family's trusted Coppos captains, killed Polly by shooting him in the back of the head. Sonny was furious and ready for war. He wanted to crush Sollozzo and anyone who stood in the way of the Corleone family. But war wasn't going to be easy. Sollozzo had powerful connections, and he was working with Captain McCluskey, a corrupt police officer who was protecting him. This made things even more dangerous for the Corleone family. They couldn't just go after Sollozzo without facing the police as well. Michael's transformation. Michael, who had always been the quiet, clean-cut brother, now found himself deeper and deeper in the family's affairs. He couldn't stand by while his family was under attack. Even though he wasn't a violent man, Michael knew that someone had to take control of the situation. One night, the family gathered to discuss what to do next. Sollozzo wanted a meeting with Michael to negotiate. He thought Michael, being the innocent son, would be easy to manipulate. Sollozzo and Captain McCluskey promised Michael that if he met with them, they could reach an understanding. But Michael knew it was a trap. During the meeting, Michael quietly suggested something shocking. He would be the one to kill Sollozzo and McCluskey. Everyone was stunned. Michael had never killed anyone before, and this would be a dangerous move. Killing a police officer, even a corrupt one like McCluskey, would bring a lot of heat on the family. But Michael was calm, cold, and determined. He knew it was the only way to protect his father and end the threat. This moment was the beginning of Michael's transformation from the good son to a key player in the mafia world. The plan to kill Sollozzo and McCluskey. The Corleones came up with a plan. Michael would meet Sollozzo and McCluskey at a restaurant. A gun would be hidden in the bathroom, and during the meeting, Michael would excuse himself to go to the restroom, retrieve the gun, and then come back to shoot both men. It was a dangerous plan, but it was the only way to eliminate Sollozzo and protect the family. The night of the meeting came. Michael met Sollozzo and McCluskey in a quiet Italian restaurant. As they ate and talked, tension filled the air. Sollozzo spoke to Michael in Italian, trying to reason with him. But Michael's mind was made up. Excusing himself to go to the bathroom, Michael calmly walked to the back of the restaurant. His heart was racing, but his face remained expressionless. In the bathroom, he found the gun hidden behind the toilet. He took a deep breath, grabbed the gun, and returned to the table. Without hesitation, Michael pulled out the gun and shot Sollozzo in the head. McCluskey, shocked, barely had time to react before Michael shot him as well, killing both men in cold blood. The restaurant went silent. Michael had just committed his first murders, and there was no turning back. Michael goes into hiding. After the killings, Michael had to leave New York immediately. Killing a police officer, even a corrupt one, would cause a huge manhunt, and the Corleones needed to protect Michael. The family sent Michael to Sicily, the homeland of the Corleones, to hide until the situation cooled down. In Sicily, Michael lived under the protection of Don Tommasino, an old friend of his father. Sicily was beautiful but dangerous, filled with its own mafia families and rivalries. Here, Michael experienced a different kind of life, far away from the chaos of New York, but his heart was still with his family. The Godfather, Part 1, Part 3. Michael's exile in Sicily. After killing Sollozzo and Captain McCluskey, Michael Corleone had to leave New York immediately to avoid arrest and prosecution. The killing of a police officer was a serious crime, even though McCluskey was corrupt. The Corleone family, with the help of their old connections, arranged for Michael to escape to Sicily, the homeland of his father, Don Vito Corleone. Michael traveled to Sicily under a new identity, hiding from the law and his enemies. He was protected by Don Tommasino, an old family friend who controlled a small part of the mafia world in Sicily. Sicily was a beautiful yet dangerous place, with its own culture, landscapes, and rules. Here, the mafia operated in a different way than in New York, and Michael learned more about the deep roots of his family's power. Michael arrived in Sicily with 2 bodyguards, Fabrizio and Collo, who were fiercely loyal to him. They traveled together through the countryside, staying in small villages and hiding from anyone who might recognize Michael. He couldn't communicate with his family back in New York, so he was cut off from everything he knew. Sicily was quiet and peaceful, but Michael still carried the weight of his past actions. The murder of Sollozzo and McCluskey haunted him. For the first time, Michael had taken a step into the violent world he once avoided. Now, as he wandered through the hills of Sicily, he was unsure of what his future held. A new love in Sicily. Apollonia. While hiding in Sicily, Michael met a beautiful young woman named Apollonia Vitelli. Apollonia was the daughter of a local cafe owner, and when Michael first saw her, he was immediately captivated by her beauty. She was young, innocent, and full of life, a contrast to the dark and dangerous world Michael had come from. Michael's bodyguards warned him to be careful. Falling in love in Sicily was risky, especially since he was still in hiding. But Michael couldn't help himself. He began to court Apollonia in the traditional Sicilian way, meeting her family and showing deep respect for her father. In Sicily, families were very protective of their daughters, and Michael had to win the approval of Apollonia's father before they could be together. Eventually, Michael and Apollonia got married in a traditional Sicilian wedding. The ceremony was beautiful, and for a brief moment Michael found happiness. He was far away from the violence of New York, and he imagined a peaceful life in Sicily with his new wife. Apollonia brought light into his life, and for the first time in a long time Michael felt a sense of hope. The return of violence. But Michael's peaceful life in Sicily would not last. Even though he was hiding, his enemies had not forgotten about him. Back in New York, tensions were still high between the Corleone family and their rivals, and Michael's enemies were determined to find him. One day, Michael's bodyguard, Fabrizio, betrayed him. Secretly, Fabrizio had been working with Michael's enemies, and he planted a bomb in Michael's car. The plan was to kill Michael, ending the Corleone family's power once and for all. On that fateful day, Apollonia was preparing to drive the car. Michael, who was nearby, saw her getting into the vehicle and realized something was wrong. He shouted for her to stop, but it was too late. The car exploded, killing Apollonia instantly. Michael was devastated. His new wife, the woman who had brought him hope and happiness, was taken from him in the most violent way. Once again, Michael was pulled back into the dark, dangerous world he had tried to escape. Michael's return to New York. After Apollonia's death, Michael was left heartbroken and filled with rage. He had lost everything he had loved in Sicily, and now he had to face the reality of his life. He could no longer hide in Sicily. He had to return to New York and take control of his family's business. Meanwhile, back in New York, the Corleone family was going through its own struggles. Sonny, Michael's older brother, had taken over as the acting don after their father, Vito, was shot. Sonny was fiery and hot-headed, and he wasn't as careful as his father had been. The war between the Corleones and their rivals was growing more intense, and Sonny's temper only made things worse. Sonny's anger reached its peak when he found out that his sister, Connie, was being abused by her husband, Carlo Rizzi. Furious, Sonny went after Carlo and beat him up in the street, warning him never to hurt Connie again. But Carlo, feeling humiliated, secretly worked with the Corleone family's enemies to set a trap for Sonny. One day, Sonny received a call that Connie was being beaten again by Carlo. Enraged, Sonny jumped into his car and drove off to confront Carlo. But on the way, Sonny was ambushed by enemy gunmen at a toll booth. They shot him multiple times, killing him in a brutal and bloody attack. The Godfather's final request. With Sonny dead and Michael still in Sicily, the Corleone family was in chaos. Don Vito, who had been recovering from his wounds, was devastated by the loss of his eldest son. He knew that the only way to protect the family was to bring Michael back to New York. The family made arrangements for Michael to return, and after months in hiding, Michael came back home. But he wasn't the same man who had left. He had lost his wife, his brother, and a part of himself. Michael had now fully embraced the role of a Corleone, and he was ready to take over the family business. Don Vito, realizing that Michael was now the only hope for the family, decided to make one last move. He met with the heads of the other mafia families in New York to negotiate peace. Don Vito was tired of the bloodshed and wanted to protect his remaining family members. At the meeting, Don Vito agreed to make peace with the other families, putting an end to the mafia war. But this peace came with a price. Don Vito knew that the only way to truly secure the family's future was for Michael to take over as the new head of the Corleone family. Michael takes control. Michael, now back in New York, began to quietly take control of the family business. He was no longer the innocent young man who had once wanted nothing to do with the mafia. He was now a calculating and ruthless leader, ready to do whatever it took to protect his family and their empire. The enemies of the Corleone family had underestimated Michael. They still saw him as the outsider, the son who had wanted to live a normal life. But Michael was no longer that person. He had learned from his father, from Sonny, and from his experiences in Sicily. He was now ready to lead the family into a new era. The Godfather, Part 1, Part 4. Michael's consolidation of power. After returning to New York, Michael Corleone was determined to restore order and power to the Corleone family. The chaotic situation that had been left in the wake of Sonny's death needed to be addressed swiftly and decisively. Michael began by consolidating his control over the family's businesses. He met with key family members and allies to outline his plans. One of his first moves was to deal with the traitors and enemies who had been causing trouble. This included settling scores with those who had betrayed the family or worked against them during the recent conflicts. One of Michael's significant actions was dealing with Barzini, the rival mafia boss who was a major threat to the Corleone family. Michael knew that Barzini was behind much of the trouble that had plagued the Corleones, including Sonny's murder. Michael's strategy was to end the war with a decisive blow that would put an end to Barzini's ambitions and secure the family's position in the underworld. The infamous meeting. Michael orchestrated a meeting with the heads of the remaining mafia families to negotiate a peace agreement. This meeting took place in a church where Michael was serving as his sister's godfather. The setting was symbolic, representing a blend of family and crime, tradition and power. During the meeting, Michael made a series of offers to the other families. He promised to keep his family's business away from certain areas that were of interest to the other families and offered cooperation in other criminal enterprises. In return, he sought a truce and an end to the ongoing violence. The meeting was a turning point where Michael demonstrated his strategic thinking and ability to broker peace. The day of vengeance. While Michael was negotiating peace, he was also preparing for a final act of vengeance. He meticulously planned a series of executions of those responsible for the Corleone family's suffering. This included the traitorous Carlo Rizzi, who had been involved in Sonny's murder. Michael's plan was carefully coordinated. On the day of his sister Connie's wedding to Carlo, Michael arranged for a series of violent assassinations. The hits were executed with precision. The corrupt Sollozzo, the traitorous Barzini, and several of his men were all eliminated in one fell swoop. The coordinated attacks were carried out by Michael's trusted men, ensuring that there would be no mistakes. Michael becomes the Don. With his enemies dealt with and peace secured, Michael was finally ready to fully embrace his role as the head of the Corleone family. His transformation from a reluctant outsider to the ruthless Don of the Corleones was complete. He had taken control of the family's empire, restored its power, and secured its future. Michael's rise to power was marked by a series of changes. He began to distance himself from the traditional ways of his father, Vito Corleone. While Don Vito had been known for his kindness and respect for the old ways of the Mafia, Michael was more modern and pragmatic. He focused on maintaining the family's power and expanding its influence in new ways. The final scenes of the film showcase Michael's complete transformation. As he takes his seat as the new Don, he ensures that his family's enemies are eliminated and their position is secure. The film ends with a chilling scene where Michael's men carry out the last of the executions, while Michael himself is seen in his office, now fully in control. The final shot shows Michael's wife, Kay, looking on with a mix of confusion and realization as Michael's cold and calculating demeanor becomes fully apparent. Legacy and reflection. The conclusion of The Godfather marks the beginning of a new era for the Corleone family. Michael's rise to power signifies a shift in the family's operations and their place in the criminal world. His transformation into the Don is complete, and the legacy of his father is now in his hands. The film ends with Michael's solidification of his power and the dramatic conclusion of the story's central conflicts. It showcases Michael's evolution from a reluctant participant in the family business to a powerful and feared leader, setting the stage for future developments in the Corleone saga.